adding and subtracting positive and negative decimals. So before we start with several examples, let us try to recall about the rules in adding numbers. So the very first rule is that when you add numbers with same signs, like for example, positive plus positive or negative plus negative. So what do we do? First, we add the absolute values of the numbers, or let's say we have to ignore the signs. And then you keep the same sign. For example, we have here negative 1.4 plus negative 0.5. So, first, what we need to do is we need to consider the signs. So, trying to look at the signs, both are negative. So, that means we can now follow the first step. And what is that? We need to get the absolute value of each number. So the absolute value of negative 1.4 is equal to 1.4. And then the absolute value of negative 0.5 is 0.5. Then we add the absolute value of these numbers. So we need to align the decimal points, 1.4, then 0.5. I repeat, make sure that the decimal points are aligned. So you start from here. 4 plus 5 is 9. Then 1 plus 0 is 1. Then align the decimal point. So that would be a 1.9. So now, as I said a while ago, the second step is to keep the common sign. So our answer is negative 1.9. Let's try another example. We have here negative 3.5 plus 2.1. If you notice, the signs now are different. This is negative. So I would like to highlight that. This is negative. This is positive, 2.1. That means that the first rule will now apply. Therefore, there's another rule. What could that be? When we add numbers with different signs, first we need to subtract the absolute values of the numbers. And then keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. Going back to our example a while ago, the first one is negative, the other one is positive. So what do we do first? So in a sketch paper, we try to get the absolute value of negative 3.5, and that would be 3.5, and the absolute value of 2.1 is also 2.1. So we need to subtract them. 3.5 is greater than a 2.1, so 3.5, align the decimal point, and then subtract. 5 minus 1 is 4, 3 minus 2 is 1. Then align the decimal point, so you have 1.4. Now, we will consider the sign of the larger number based from its absolute value. So, 3.5 is greater. Originally, it is negative. So that means our final answer would also be negative. Then, we put 1.4. Okay, now, what if the operation is subtraction? When we subtract numbers, always remember that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So what you need to do now is you need to change a subtraction problem to addition so that all you need to do afterwards is to follow the rules for adding positive and negative numbers. For example, for this one, we have 10.4 minus negative 3.2. So we have to make a sketch here. Okay. So 10 minus negative 3.2 is the same as 10.4 adding the opposite of negative 3.2. The opposite of negative 3.2 is 3.2. So now the operation is already addition. You follow the rules in adding. So both are positive. That means all you need to do is to follow rule number 1, adding numbers with same signs. So get the absolute value of each numbers. 10.4, the absolute value of 10.4 is just 10.4. Absolute value of 3.2 is just 3.2. Then you add them, 10.4, 3.2. So 6, 3, 1. Then align the decimal point, so you have 13.6. And both are positive, therefore the answer is 13.6. Let's try another example. For this one, we have here negative 45.63 minus negative 24.12. So I'll make a box so that you will not be confused. So we'll make an area for scratch here. So first step is to change the operation to addition. Always remember, subtracting numbers is the same as adding the opposite. So for this, negative 45.63 is the same as adding the opposite of negative 24.12 is positive 24.12. Now, the operations here, this is negative, this is positive. That means they have different signs. You need to subtract them. But before that, you find the absolute value of each numbers. The absolute value of negative 45.63 is 45.63. And the absolute value of 24.12 is equal to 24.12. Always remember this. The absolute value of any number will always be positive because we're talking about distance. And the distance in any direction would always be positive. So going back, they have different signs, so we need to subtract the absolute value now of each numbers. 45.63 is greater compared to 24.12. So we put it below 45.63. So align natin yung decimal points. Then we subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 minus 4 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. Then align the decimal point. Now, what would be the sign of our final answer? So looking back in our given, if you compare 45.63 and 24.12, 45.63 is greater. And originally, it's negative. So our final answer now is negative 21.51. So let's try to wrap up everything or review what we have discussed. When we try to add positive and another positive, the sign of the answer would be positive. and you need to add them, the absolute value. And if in case you add negative and negative, the sign would also be negative. But if the signs are different, you need to keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. And then always remember to rewrite subtraction as addition of the opposite, so that you will just have to follow the rules in adding.